Okay, we're live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Oxnard City Council Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting this morning for April 14th. Can we take the roll call posting of the agenda and the flag salute? And Councilman McDonald, can you lead us in the flag salute when we get to that part?
Sure.
Member Flynn? Member Flynn?
He's on.
Yeah, he's here. Might be muted though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, he's here. Member McDonald
I'm here.
and Chair Perello.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Wednesday, April 8th.
Okay. Can we have the flag salute and Councilmember Brian McDonald will lead us, please?
Thank you. If you'd please rise and join me in saluting the flag of our nation by saying, I pledge allegiance
to the flag,
to the flag of the United States of America and to the
to
republic
for which
for
it
which
stands,
it stands, one nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item of agenda, I do not see any speaker cards. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda, Ms. City Clerk?
No, Chair, there aren't.
Okay, we go to item C, the consent agenda. The City Clerk's Department, the subject is approval of the minutes. The recommendation that the Public Works and Transportation Committee approve the minutes for the March 24th regular meeting as presented. Have the members of the body had an opportunity to read the minutes, and is there a recommendation?
I have, and I would move approval.
Mayor, are you there? If he's not, I'll second it. Roll call, please.
Member Flynn? Member McDonald?
Aye.
And Chair Perello.
Yes. Moving on to reports. Item D1, Public Works Department. The subject, award agreement A-8205 to Hardy and Harper Incorporated for thin maintenance overlay project phase 2, a rebid, PW 18-58R2, 1055. I'm sorry, 10. Okay, and the recommendation, can we have staff read the recommendation, please?
Yes, of course. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Tatiana Arnaud, the city engineer, and I am here to request the award of the construction management agreement or the construction agreement with Hardy and Harper for the thin maintenance overlay phase 2 project. Next slide, please, Michelle. So the recommendation is that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend the City Council to approve and authorize 1, the mayor to execute agreement A-8205 for $6,550,000 to Hardy and Harper Inc. for the thin maintenance overlay project phase 2 rebid PW 18-58R2, and number 2, a project contingency amount of $655,000 for project contingency for the thin maintenance overlay project phase 2. 3, a project allocation of $458,500 for engineering inspection, survey, and project management for the thin maintenance overlay phase 2 project. And number 4, the city manager to execute a budget appropriation of $100,000 from the tab 0 Southwest Ormond Fund 315. Next slide, please. So in summary, we opened bids on February 4th of this year. Hardy and Harper was found to be the low bidder at around $6.5 million. We are scheduled to begin construction in May of 2020 with a completion date of October 2020. Our total project cost comes out to about $7.6 million, and this includes the $6.5 for the contract and then the contingency and engineering inspection, survey, and project management costs as well. Next slide, please. So in general, the project scope includes the street resurfacing for commercial, residential, and arterial streets. In addition to that, we're going to be doing concrete digouts and repairs, also some mill and fill, as well as the concrete work at various locations, such as sidewalks, panels that may have been lifted or upgrading any sort of ADA ramp. This project does include several streets that were identified back in 1718, but lack of funding has delayed these repairs until now. We are also including several projects that were identified in the approved 2019 capital improvement program. And again, we're scheduled to begin next month and complete this project by October of 2020. Next slide, please. So we use a pavement management system to assist us with tracking the inventory, storing work history, and furnishing budget estimates to optimize our funding for our pavement system. This also helps us identify the candidate streets for potential repair and maintenance based on a pavement condition index. Now, a pavement condition index, or otherwise known as PCI, is a numerical index between 0 and 100, which is used to indicate the general condition of a pavement section. The pavement management system uses a variety of measurements to determine the PCI, including how many cracks there are in a mile of pavement, how deep and long those cracks are, what the crack pattern is, and what percentage of a road segment displays deficiencies. Furthermore, crack and deficiency patterns can include alligator cracking, block cracking, longitudinal cracking, and transverse cracking. We're going to have some photos here in a little bit after this slide that's going to show you a little bit of those patterns in the existing roads. So for this project, we have actually broken it into two categories of work: overlay and preventative maintenance. For the overlay portion, the average PCI is down at 26.5, which is considered very poor. We will be treating 39 lane miles with the overlay. So this includes a 1¼ inch overlay, and any failed areas will receive a 6-inch dig out repair prior to actually overlaying. Next slide, please. Now, for the preventative maintenance portion, the average PCI is up at 70, which is considered satisfactory. We'll also be treating another 39 lane miles with the preventative maintenance. This is to maintain our PCI at those higher levels. This includes microsurfacing and crack sealing in the arterial streets only. Any failed areas will receive a 2-inch mill and fill prior to microsurfacing. So now microsurfacing, I don't know if you guys have heard of this before, but it's similar to slurry sealing, with the only difference being the asphalt emulsion type, which actually cures faster and can be applied in cold weather or overnight to expedite the construction process. Next slide, please. So for the overlay portion, we will be working on Vineyard between Oxnard Boulevard and the 101, the infamous Esplanade Drive, C Street, East 5th Street, and Bard, along with several commercial areas. For the preventative maintenance portion, we will be working on Woolley Road, Del Norte Boulevard, and Saviors Road. This map is also attached to the staff report package for your viewing, and we actually also listed all of the streets in the staff report if you want to take a look at that. Next slide, please. So, like I was mentioning, here are some photos of the existing road conditions for this project. As you can see, we've been neglecting some commercial areas for quite some time, and this project will be tackling all of the worst of those areas. So one to note is West Star Drive. We've gotten several phone calls for this one in particular, and so this project will be taking care of that. There's some more photos. Next slide, please, Michelle. Again, here's an example of some concrete work that we're going to do over at 5th and Meta. And then there's going to be some dig out work that's going to happen there on Statham. Next. So again, here we're showing some alligator cracking over at 5th Street, and then some of the lifted sidewalks over at Statham as well that will be taken care of with this project. Next slide, please. So again, the notice of inviting bids was published on January 16th with bids due on February 14th. This was a rebid, hence why we did a shortened bidding timeframe. I also want to note that we actually saw more bidders this time than we have in the past 2 years for street resurfacing projects. Typically, we're getting bids from Toro and Granite. This time we got Hardy and Harper and Sully Miller also proposing, which is a good sign of things to come. We believe this is due to the project being larger than if we had put just the overlay portion out separate from the maintenance. Now, in summary, Hardy and Harper came in as a low bidder at 6.5. Followed closely behind that was Toro at 6.7, Grant at 6.8, and Solely at 6.9. So we have a pretty good grouping here, and we feel comfortable with the bids that came in. Staff did research and verify all the required contractor credentials as usual. Next. So again, to summarize the project cost, the base bids with the additive items that will go into the contract is $6.5 million. We're asking for 10% contingency on top of that for any unforeseen conditions of $655,000. And lastly, we're requesting $458,000 for engineering, inspection, survey, and project management for a total project cost of $7.6 million. Next slide, please. So now getting into the funding discussion, it's a little convoluted, but I'll try to clear it up for you. So we are combining the funding from several projects that are part of this contract and rolling it into one project number to manage the project more effectively. That way we don't have to track, 7 different project numbers at a time. So these include the Vineyard Avenue Resurfacing Phase 2 project, the Commercial Central Neighborhood Street Resurfacing project, and the 5 Point Neighborhood Street Resurfacing for a total of $2.3 million in that category. That will all be rolled into a project that we call the Thin Maintenance Overlay Project. Next slide, please. So we also have some savings from prior projects that we are transferring to this project as well. So that includes the Vineyard Avenue project we did earlier this year, the Auto Center Neighborhood project, Challenge Boulevard, and then Phase 1 of the Thin Maintenance Overlay. Next slide, please. So due to the need to replace cast iron pipes in the neighborhood shown on this slide, we are trying to repurpose the street resurfacing funding from the approved CIP, which includes these projects, to basically fund the TMO Phase 2 project. We include the average PCI for these streets in here to also show you that these streets, although not in the best condition, are still in better condition than the average PCI of 26.5 for TMO. But again, I just want to emphasize, we're moving these because we would like to go in and do the cast iron pipe replacement before we touch the streets on these. Next slide, please. So I think you need to go down. Yeah, one more. Actually, one more. There you go. All right, so TMO project number 18I-N06 has $1 million available in the project budget right now. So if after this approval, we would be requesting $6.56 million for a total of $7.6 million to fund the project. It also requires a $100,000 appropriation from the HERO Fund, and that's to do the ADA improvements over at the Civic Center so that we can continue any sort of tenant improvements that may be needed on the interior. So after the appropriation, the projected unrestricted fund balance for Fund 315 is $4.2 million. I also want to note, and it's not on this slide, that we did receive between when this staff report was uploaded and now a rubberized pavement grant from the California Department of Recycling and Recovery. So this grant program provides funds to agencies that use rubberized asphalt for road resurfacing that uses recycled tires. So this program will reimburse us at $10 per ton of rubberized asphalt concrete, up to approximately 21,000 tons for this project for an anticipated reimbursement of approximately $213,000. So that's not reflected here in this staff report, but we will update that before we get to council to show those savings. Next slide, please. And that does conclude this presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Aaron. As usual, very good, informative presentation. Well done. I do not see that I have any speaker cards on this. Do we have any, Ms. City Clerk?
No speaker cards, but there was a written comment submitted by Jose Garcia, which has been forwarded to the committee members.
Do we want to read that into the record?
No, it's quite long.
Okay. Do my fellow council members have any comments?
I just have a question, Mr. Chair.
Go. Yes.
In regards to the prioritizing this, the streets with the lower PCIs will likely go first. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Thank you very much. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the project as a whole, that it's really a relief to see these areas, the industrial areas and Vineyard, and the other areas that were presented. It's really just gives me a great feeling to know that there's going to be, I think Ms. Arnaud said it was going to be an 1.5 inch overlay. Is that correct, Mrs. Arnaud, and those, or Ms. Arnaud, in those areas?
Yeah, we'll have 39 lane miles with the 1.25 inch overlay, and then another 39 miles for the preventative maintenance.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's going to be fantastic, especially some of the streets that were shown, Mr. Chair and Committee Member McDonald. Some of those streets are in such disrepair. I've gotten a lot of calls, especially in the industrial area, and I've been able to give some of those businesses updates. But Ms. Arnaud, just two questions. One is, when will the project be completed? Just to restate that again, when will it start and when will it be completed for all the areas?
So we're looking to start in May and end by October of this year.
Okay, May through October. And then the second thing I wanted to ask is this overlay, will it last approximately 10 years? And for the rubberized asphalt, will that last any longer?
It all depends on the road and what kind of traffic you have on it. But yeah, we're anticipating anywhere between 5 to 10 years for these overlays, including the maintenance portion.
I see. Okay, very well. And this is perhaps, it's related, and I know it's come up in these conversations about streets, but it's a very quick question. And that is, does the Environmental Resources Enterprise Fund contribute at all towards, and I know it might not, well, some of these areas have trash trucks that are on them, but does the ER department's enterprise fund contribute money towards any of these street repair or pavement repairs?
No, they do not.
They do not. And I'll just ask the city manager if that is normal, that money comes from one of the utilities, in this case because of the trash trucks and the kind of damage that they do to streets, whether or not money shouldn't be appropriated from the ER division's enterprise fund towards street repairs.
Mr. Mayor, that's a fantastic question. It isn't practice, particularly because of the way the taxing structure is set, but also there are all kinds of large vehicles that travel our streets. And as you know, that's something I want to look at prospectively with future large developments, to explore the possibility of having a truck impact fee that's annual versus a one-time upfront fee when the development is approved. But currently, that's not our practice.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, a few questions, Mr. Arnett. On the slide showing 5th Street and Maida Street, the damage to the sidewalks, that we have a member of the public and past chair or current chair, Miss Pat Brown, that comes oftentimes and asks about getting the trucks out of certain areas. Is this an example of heavy damage done to trucks cutting corners, where the sidewalks are busted up in this manner?
Yeah, that's correct. Those intersections just weren't meant for truck turning purposes, obviously, and that's part of why, at least down the boulevard, we've removed that as the truck route up to Gonzales, and we are currently actually working on removing it from the truck route from the 101 to Gonzales as well, so that none of the boulevard is on the truck route until it exits the city boundaries on the south side.
Very smart. Thank you. Thank you for that. On
Council member, I would think a Subaru could cause that damage too if you kept climbing the curb all the time.
no, not my Subaru, I'll tell you that. The slide where there was a discussion about project funding, and it had projects and it listed the Vineyard Avenue funding where there would be proposed fund transfers on that particular slide for completed projects in closeout process. On the Vineyard, all of them indicate that there is going to be a total amount of transfer of the funds. except for the Vineyard Avenue Street resurfacing. Why is there not a complete transfer of funds for the Vineyard Avenue resurfacing?
There were still some project
I know the
expenses.
slides are when we're looking at them in the presentation, the slide has a number on it. My hard copy does not. I apologize for that. But
Oh, no worries. I have it here in front of me. I know exactly what you're talking about. So that one, the reason we're not taking the entire $413,000 is because we anticipated a couple more invoices coming in for that project that we obviously need funding for still. That's through the closeout process. So in anticipation of that, we're only taking what we know we can actually take without hurting the project.
thank you very much. Those were my questions. It is, my fellow council members, it is embarrassing to see some of the photographs of how the streets have gotten, but we all need to remember how we got into this spot due to deferred maintenance because of various reasons and then financial situations. We are working ourselves out of it. And even in this day of, with the health issues and stuff, there's going to be some work being done, as there is right now. Today, there's a water pipeline being put on, I believe, H Street. There is work being done. There are people working. There are paychecks being generated from work being done, and the city of Oxnard continuing to move forward. I want people to remember that. Please remember that. The second thing is, I'd like to just bring to the attention of the city manager and the staff the smarts and common sense things that you guys are bringing to our attention, and the way you are implementing them is to be complimented. We don't hear enough praise on our staff on that. They're to be complimented. One of the things that I've recently been able to hear, because it's on the radio more often, is the Mayor Garcetti. And they're talking of Los Angeles. He's talking about the works that they're going to do in Los Angeles. Because of the less traffic and the now fewer cars, the lower cost for traffic control will allow them to place more money into the street projects. And I'm sure that our staff is looking into that also. So those are my only questions. Unless council has anything more, I'd look for a recommendation, please. If no one will make a recommendation, I move the recommended action.
Okay, the mayor moved it. You just didn't hear
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's okay.
I didn't hear it.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Roll call vote, please. I apologize.
Member Flynn,
Aye.
Member McDonald,
Aye.
Chair Perrello.
Yes.
The motion carries 3-0.
Okay, the
Mr.
next-
Chair,
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you very
Chair,
much, staff.
before we go on to the next item, I'd like to make a quick comment. So related to this item and what your closing comment was, we do have future road projects coming online, and I have asked staff to review those to see which ones we could reprioritize to take advantage of the fact that there's less traffic on our major streets right now. And in order to do that, we're going to need to bring some of these potential projects that we're shuffling straight to council. So I just want to inform you that for a few of these, we will bypass this committee so that we do take advantage of this time when the stay-at-home order is out, so that we can, again, take advantage of less traffic on our major roads. Thank you.
Thank you
I
very
can
much.
add to that if you don't mind. I could tell you what streets we're looking at pulling up. So it's
No, we can't
Sorry.
do that. It's not agendized.
okay.
Thank you.
Understood.
As the chair of this committee, I appreciate it, and I'm sure I believe I can speak for other members of the committee and the general public. I appreciate the smarts that are going to the projects and the specific, smart, intelligent use of public funds. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda item number 2, D2. The subject is restructuring of Public Works Engineering and Traffic Engineering divisions. And if we could have the staff read the recommendation, please.
Hi, yes. Good morning again, Chair and Committee. Tatiana Arnaud, City Engineer, and I'm trying to request the adoption of resolution amendments for reclassification of full-time positions for Public Works Engineering and Traffic Engineering. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend to City Council, 1, the mayor to adopt a resolution to amend resolution number $15,241, authorizing full-time equivalent positions pursuant to Chapter 4 of the City Personnel Rules and Regulations. 2, the mayor to adopt a resolution to amend resolution number 15,242, authorizing and approving classification and salary schedules pursuant to Chapter 4 of the City Personnel Rules and Regulations. And finally, number 3, the city manager to approve a budget appropriation in the amount of $18,469. Next slide, please. So since approval of our 5-year capital improvement program, we've been working on the extensive list of projects for this fiscal year, in addition to about 33 projects that were previously initiated that did not actually make it into the CIP. So in order to maximize efficiencies, keep up with best practices, and stay on our project schedules, I've been working very closely with human resources staff to identify areas in the staffing structure that require restructuring in order to successfully achieve our operational and administrative goals as we try to get through the CIP. Next slide, please.
May I request that slide stay there a moment? Ms. Aaron, for the public that doesn't get an opportunity to be aware of all these things, that picture, and can you please describe what that is? Because that's something from deferred maintenance over a lot of years, and this is what happens. Can you please describe what we're looking at in that picture?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's Fire Station 6. We actually are about to complete that project, so I'll have pictures for that soon for you guys. But basically, we had several leaks in the roof, and that was leaking into the actual building itself and causing damage on the interior. So what we did with this project is we not only replaced the roof itself, but actually repaired some of the exterior and repainted it all. And on the inside, we basically fixed or repaired any of the areas that were damaged due to the leaks in general.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, next slide. So for the past several years, what I have learned, at least since I've taken over this position, is that this division has suffered from low staffing levels, a high turnover rate. There have been repeated recruitment attempts of key positions, such as the one I'm sitting in now, senior civils, project managers, and inspectors. In addition to those challenges, the organizational structure of the division does not have any sort of supervisory or lead staff layer, making it difficult to oversee all of the work product and staff while ensuring quality and, most importantly, accuracy. So next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is the existing structure as it stands today. So currently I do have 17 direct reports. This does include vacancies, but nonetheless, if I had those filled, there would be 17 direct reports. So this span of supervision is obviously too broad to successfully manage in any sort of way. Even if I wanted to meet one-on-one with each of these direct reports, you're talking about almost half of my work week is spent just meeting with these individuals on top of all of the other responsibilities that come with this job. So if we drill into it a little bit more, next slide, please. I have 9 direct reports under what I'm calling the Capital Improvement Program section, which includes all of the project managers and the inspectors. Next slide. Under the in-house design, plan check, studies, and master planning section, I have only 4 direct reports. Luckily for me, I'm able to rely on Mr. Asita Witanahe, which is a senior civil, to oversee this section, which actually helps support me in what I'm trying to do here. Next slide, please. Our traffic section is actually relatively small for a city of this size, and we're looking to progressively staff up. However, individuals with traffic specialties are really hard to come by, so we are going to approach this leg incrementally, starting with focusing on hiring a city traffic engineer to lead the team. As of right now, for this section, I only have 2 direct reports at the moment. Next slide, please. And finally, within the admin section, I have 2 direct reports. One is over contracts and procurement, and the other is an office assistant for the team. Next slide. Okay, so now here's an overview of the proposed structure for engineering. This includes the reclassification of the landscape architect, the construction and maintenance engineer, and transportation services manager to supervising civil engineers to create that supervisory leg for me, or I guess section for me. Next. So this is pretty much, basically I would go from having 17 direct reports down to 6, which is significantly more manageable. One supervising civil engineer will oversee the capital improvement program section. The second will oversee the in-house design, plan checking, studies, and master planning section. And lastly, the third supervising civil engineer will oversee the traffic leg, and they will also be designated as the city traffic engineer. We have a classification called just traffic engineer. It's our opinion that that position does not pay nearly enough to be designated as a city traffic engineer, and we believe that that is why we're having a difficult time actually recruiting for that position. That position's been vacant since November of last year, and we've had no applicants come through that meet the minimum requirements as of today. So we're looking to change that by reclassifying a position to a supervising civil, which is more appropriate in terms of the compensation. And then in this structure, the management analyst 2 will still continue to oversee the contracts and procurement, and the office assistant and extra help don't really require a lot of time from me, so hence why they're remaining as my direct reports. Next slide, please, Michelle. So here's a summary table of the reclassifications we are requesting. Please note that through this process, we are also requesting to reclassify a grant specialist 1 to a grants coordinator. The reason being is that we have a lot of grants that we're processing right now, and really what we need is somebody with the level of responsibility at a grants coordinator level and not down at a grant specialist. This position does actually get housed under Public Works Administration, but for efficiency purposes, we've added it to this request here. Next slide, please. So this is probably my favorite slide of all. The positions in the reclassifications will be working primarily on the enterprise projects, as there are no general fund monies available for projects at the moment anyways. So we're proposing to shift our home accounts to an even split between the enterprise funds. I'm excited to let you know that this does result in a $733,000 annual savings to the general fund. Next slide, please. There is a slight increase in the annual cost due to these reclassifications, but it does allow the structure to be more functional with the supervisory level. Additionally, I'd like to note and emphasize that these positions will be charging to approved CIP projects regardless. Next slide, please. So here's a summary table of the financial impacts. It results in an overall increase of $110,000 annually, but again, these positions will be charging to CIP projects. For this fiscal year, because we're nearing the end of it, there's only an $18,000 impact, and that's what the appropriation request has been for. Next slide. That does conclude this presentation, and I can take any questions.
I have no information here about public comments. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this matter?
No.
Okay. Do my fellow committee members have any questions or comments?
I don't have any.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question for Tatiana. Tatiana, I think one of the positions that you showed that was being, I could be wrong, phased out was a landscape architect. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the reason being is because typically speaking with landscape architecture services, a landscape architect can help you with horizontal layouts of different items, such as obviously landscaping for parks or outside of buildings, things of that nature. But typically speaking, for instance, if we're going to do a park project and we require a landscape architect, you're also going to need mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services to some degree. And most landscape architecture firms have those services attached to them. Now, if we have an in-house landscape architect, that doesn't serve us well because we still would have to contract the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing out, and they'd have to coordinate with this landscape architect. So just from an efficiency standpoint, you really do want to have the landscape architect along with the MEP team or the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing team together working on a project under one contract. And therefore, I would suggest that, you know, changing this over to the supervising civil engineer would do the city better.
I see. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, Mr. Chair and Committee Member McDonald. However, my concern, and I like to, you know, extend this, you know, obviously beyond our immediate group to obviously the city manager, is that, you know, we've had some major citywide, we've had some major landscape maintenance district issues and challenges that we've had to overcome. We have a lot of areas throughout the city that fell into the general fund, which were general purpose areas that, you know, a very limited staff is getting around to as often as they possibly can. My concern, Mr. Chair and Committee Member McDonald and Mr. City Manager, is that we don't have, at least from my knowledge, a citywide plan to perhaps place more drought tolerant plants, kind of redesign the fact that we have millions and millions of dollars of liabilities that we've inherited, yet we don't seem to have a plan on how we're going to maybe replace some of that vegetation or supplement the vegetation, whatever it is that we need to do to address these you know, major financial shortfalls of maintaining this. And so my question here is, if we don't have, if we're focused on having a contract, it's not the overall planning. And so I would ask, you know, the civil engineer to deal with, to address that concern.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think what you're getting at is that there is a need in the city right now that for an urban forestry plan or something along those lines that would address what you're talking about right now.
Okay.
I've spoken to Brian Yanes, the Assistant Public Works Director, briefly on this topic, and we're hoping that when the new Parks Manager comes on board, we can, you know, try to pursue that. Although funding is still something that we're going to have to resolve, because at this moment, I don't believe that there's any funding identified for such a plan.
I understand. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Flynn, this is Rosemary Gaglione, Public Works Director. I also wanted to address that. Right now, with the limited funds we have to focus on, as Tatiana said, what we do have funding for. We do need to make this broader effort to redesign our parks, but right now we don't have the money for that, so we wouldn't want to have a landscape architect on board that we couldn't keep consistently busy, or that we would have to have him or her do other tasks than what their specialty is.
I see. I understand. I just want to say to my fellow committee members and to the Public Works Director, I appreciate the explanation. I just think when we talk about prioritization, and it's vast, right, in Public Works about, you know, where do you start and everything else, but what has, I believe, suffered not only in due part to not having the money, but then the budget cuts that we've already had to make, is the physical aesthetic beauty of the city. And I understand that if it comes down to law enforcement, or if it comes down to prioritization, if you have roads that you can't drive on, you have to focus on those roads. So it is prioritization. It is first things first. I'm just very concerned that we might indefinitely postpone that. And I think too, Mr. Chair and Committee Member McDonald, I'm also looking at this from a cost savings perspective, because we cut the water budget by about $800,000. I think it was $1.5 million. I'm just throwing that off the top of my head. Maybe we cut about $800,000 from that budget. And so we know that means that a lot more trees and a lot more plant life are going to die. And I just think that just looking down the road, it's going to get much more, the condition will worsen before it gets better. And I'm just concerned about that.
Do you have any more comments?
No.
Mayor? Thank you. to the Public Works staff, thank you very much for this. I'm going to go a little bit around the house here. We just had a presentation, this previous presentation of the finance department, and we had our chief financial officer was asked a question about, you know, how are we working? How are things going? And he said they're operating at 110%. That means above maximum. You cannot last at operating at 110%. And so when we have Public Works coming in and there's going to be some changes recommended. And these changes were not just put in because of the virus and what is going on with the health concerns. But when I look at, and I'm trying to use plain common sense here. I look at slide number 5 and we talk about direct reports and we have one individual and 17 people reporting. You imagine being a parent and having 17 kids? You couldn't even keep the name straight, let alone who's doing what. There needs to be something done where a parent or a manager or somebody in the city of Oxnard, in my opinion, needs to be able to control the situation and do a better job of it. Because if you can't control it, you can't measure what you have. You can't monitor what you have. And if you can't monitor what you have, you don't know whether you're going up, down, sideways, left, or right. I appreciate this report. I appreciate the information. I am in a position where I do not know how these people interact. I know the facilities, but I don't know how they interact. There is a degree of trust required on me as a council member to approve things like this. I appreciate the Public Works Director mentioning with respect to the landscape architect. And I'll just take my common sense. I come down Gonzales Road and I see them trimming palm trees. Tremendous job. They've been there for a long time. But I'm sure that if this current council, the current 7 members on this council, had any say, they would probably not plant palm trees. Palm trees provide very little shade and a tremendous amount of trash and a tremendous amount of visibility for looking unkempt when they're not trimmed. And it won't be very long when it will be required again. As far as the trees dying, I believe in keeping them alive. But when we have them dead, there does come a time you cut it off. And if you don't have the money for the water or to replace them, you take care of it. You have to make cuts. And I'd just like to recommend to the mayor, we're coming up to some pretty tight stuff here. There's going to be some severe cuts that we're going to be looking at. And although as important as a landscape position is, if in the words of the Public Works Director, we don't have enough work to keep them busy, the general public right now is watching. A tremendous amount of those general public do not have jobs anymore. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We have to, as I'm sure all the council members that are on this board and me, tighten up our belts. And this is an item that I believe we will be watching like a hawk to make sure that we get what the results are, the expectations that are being presented to us. But I support this totally, and I compliment the staff for bringing this up. You can't have so many irons in the fire. You have no damned idea which way you're going. You got to have some people knowing what's going on. And if we need to trim what we provide in the way of services, that will be something we'll have to come forward with. And right now we're trying to keep the ship afloat. And I want to thank the public staff, the the Public Works, the general management, because getting on my soapbox here a little bit, and I apologize, but public safety is a very big thing, tremendous. When somebody's at risk, something is happening in their life, you want something, public safety, fire and police. But ladies and gentlemen, public safety includes water that you can drink and not get sick, a toilet that you can flush and it works, and it goes somewhere and doesn't get somebody else sick, and trash that is picked up where people don't worry about vermin coming in and potentially spread of disease, and the streets and the trees and the parks and everything else. And that's all I have to say. Do we have I support this. Do we have a recommendation by a member of the council, of the committee? Please.
Well, the mayor just moved it, but he's on mute. I'll second.
I'm
Okay,
sorry. I just moved it, and thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Member Flynn,
Aye.
Member McDonald,
Aye.
Chair Prello.
Yes.
The
Thank you
motion-
very much, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, guys.
I missed, did I say, somebody wanted to say something?
I just said thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. You're doing a hell of a job. Item number 3. Subject, trade services agreement with BC Laboratories Incorporated for samples testing services. Can we please have the staff do the recommendation, read the recommendation, and make the presentation? Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. My name is Tien. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director. Today, we bring forward Trade Services Agreement A-8214 with BC Laboratories. The recommendation is that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute Agreement A-8214 with BC Laboratories, Inc. for water, wastewater, and recycled water samples testing services in the amount of $800,000 through May 5th of 2023. So on January 28th of this year, the Public Works Department issued a request for bid for subject services, and we closes the bid on February 18th of this year. In total, we received 3 bids, and with the evaluation committee, including the water and wastewater division managers and the management analysts, they decided that BC Laboratories was the most responsive bidder based on price, qualification, and experience. So the water and wastewater treatments are one of those that are heavily regulated by the state and federal regulations permits. So what does that mean? That means around the clock we need to have testings. So as part of these services is that we solicit help from the outside agencies to help us test some of the samples that we are not able to do because of the equipment setup. We do have a laboratory located at the wastewater treatment facility, but those are mainly focused on treating organics, but not such as metals, volatile organics, and so forth. So what do we do with the results that we receive? Tons of them that we do every day. So on a quarterly basis, we upload those results to the regulatory agency's website, and then followed by a write-up to talk about those results and pinpoint anything that of a concern or any violations. So it's a self-reporting program. So looking at wastewater, so wastewater were permitted for the liquid phase, which is the wastewater itself, after treatment before you discharge it, and also biosolids too. So here's a quick summary of, we group them in categories such as organic compounds, pesticides, metal, carcinogens, and non-carcinogens. So there's a lot of them that we have to monitor and report the data. So for the recycled water, which is the AWPF facilities, and if you're looking at by pure numbers, those requirements, it's also more stringent than just your traditional wastewater. Then looking at water, drinking water, this is a different type of permit. This permit is issued by the State Division of Drinking Water, which you commonly hear the DDW, that's the acronyms for that. So as you can see, they're also focusing on organics, pesticides, radioactive metals, but they also do the bacteria test to make sure that, you know, our drinking water does not have, you know, a high, elevated level of bacteria concentrations. And I also wanted to point it out at the last one, the acronym PFOA and PFOS. We put as necessary is because last year, at the request of the DDW, the city conducted extensive testing through our wastewater, recycled water, drinking water, and also drinking water source that we purchased from other agencies, they all came out to be non-detectable. So I think for the next few years, we probably do minimum testing in those categories. So just to sum it up, is that, you know, for water and wastewater operations, we're heavily regulated by multiple permits, and, you know, we have to do a self-reporting on those data. So for financial impacts, the total value of this agreement is $800,000 for 3 years. And we're looking to spend about $45,000 this year between water and wastewater divisions. And then we'll budget all future expenses through our fiscal year O&M budget. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. NG. Appreciate the report and the information. The ultimate tremendous significance of what this item on the agenda is for the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the city. Do we have any public comments on this, Ms. City Clerk?
No, Chair, there are none.
Okay, any comments by my fellow committee members? Hello?
No, thank-
Go ahead, if you. Any comment?
Mr. Chair, there's no comments. I'd move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, I would like to make a comment. I didn't realize that you guys had said none. I'm going to still have to work on seeing if you see something on the screen. A couple of comments, questions, Mr. Ng. On slide number 8, we talked about the various things that come up and the water that we purchase from other agencies. The agencies that we purchase water from, can you identify them? And when we purchase the water, is there a guarantee implied on the quality of water that it will be pure, or do we have to basically retreat some of the purchased water?
Yes, Mr. Chair and committee members. The city, we do purchase treated groundwater from United Water Conservation District, and we also purchase imported water, treated imported water from Cayugas, which is through metropolitan process. Both agencies have their own permit that they have to report separately to DDW as far as their compliance. So all their results, they share it with us. And if there's any breakthrough and stuff, they're required to notify all the customers. So we're updated on their current treatment and their results.
Thank you very much. The second question is on slide 5. We identify what we're looking for. In the past, Public Works Director had identified at one time that there had been some radioactive picking up of material in the waste stream. I believe it came from the Santa Clara Waste Treatment Facility in Santa Paula on Mission Rock Road. Do we have any detection sites for anything similar that would be coming into the city? It's wastewater stream?
Mr. Chair, no, that was the single event. Because of that single event, that testing requirement still stick in our new permit for another 4 years to go. Be happy to report so far it's been non-detectable.
Thank you very much. It's good news to hear. And I'd just like to share with my fellow committee members. This morning at the intersection of just a little bit east of the intersection of Gonzales Road and Ventura Road, there is a small shopping center and there is a water purchasing site. And I watched an individual pull out 5-gallon water bottles to purchase the water. I wish the ladies and gentlemen in this community realize that the water they get out of the tap meets all the requirements for health, safety, and welfare. And the people that are running this Public Works Department, the water treatment facility, and making the presentation today, make sure that we have clean and healthy public safety with our drinking water. And those people that are purchasing the water, I wish they understood that they would be saving some money especially in these incredibly hard financial times coming up, to have more money in their, few coins in their pocket to do something else with. And with that, I support the movement on this item, and I believe we had a recommendation in a second. If I'm correct, we'll take a roll call vote. If not, I'll repeat the motion in a second, please.
We had a motion by Member McDonald and a second by Member Flynn.
Okay,
And
thank you. Can we get a roll call vote? Thank you very much, Mr. City Clerk.
Member Flynn. Member Flynn.
He's saying aye.
Aye.
Member McDonald.
Aye.
Chair Perrello.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 3-0.
And I see that as the last item on the agenda, and I am open for suggestions for future items on the Public Works Committee.
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
Just a reminder, I've got a couple requests pending out there. One is the looking at a food waste recycling system that involves our wastewater treatment plant for recyclable food waste that come through the MRF, and also for quiet zones for railroad crossing. And I realize staff is maxed out and there's a lot to do, so I would say if there's any priority, I'd ask for the food waste recycling first, and then we can get to the quiet zones later when staff has an opportunity.
That seems to make a tremendous amount of common sense. Does management want to have any idea of when possibly this would be coming forward with the concerns addressed by Mr. McDonald?
Yes, hi, Mr. Chair. This is Tian, Assistant Public Works Director. I'm writing subject agenda item as you speak. I'm currently researching, some of the technology, so I should be done within a couple weeks and then ready to upload.
That's regarding the food waste.
The food
item.
waste.
Yeah, and we thank you for understanding, and we'll bring the quiet zone thing at a future time when we have the ability to do it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
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 Just to address Member McDonald's second request, my understanding was, and I think I had a conversation with Jeff Lambert about this, is that this maybe had gone to economic development and/or it's concerned him about these quiet zones that Member McDonald just talked about for trains. And in fact, I had a conversation with just to inform the committees so that when it does get agendized, and I had a conversation recently with the director of the Port of Hueneme, and her remarks were that many of the trains, or more of the trains, might very well be assigned to the military and the very heavy cargo that the military carries rather than the ports. And so I don't know what really the status of that is, but I did have a conversation with Mr. Lambert about it, and I'm sure that Committee Member McDonald has been approached by some in businesses that are adjacent to the railroad tracks about the concerns that they have about the noise.
Thank you for sharing that information. We will, of course, take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will share this with my two committee members. I have been approached by a couple that recently relocated to the area from the Bay Area, and they were, put it mildly, a little bit upset that the trains were blowing the whistles at intersections. And I reminded them that they bought homes near railroads and intersections, and the blowing of the whistles at an intersection is a safety feature, which we'll get to the second part of my point here. There are times when I'm sitting at the stoplight at Gonzales and at Gonzales and Oxnard Boulevard, and the Amtrak will come through, and the crossing arms are down, and the Amtrak will blow the horn. And when she blows that horn, I'm often blown away, or at Vineyard Avenue and Oxnard Boulevard, that they don't blow the horn further down the train tracks to give more of an advanced warning, because in those specific areas there have been fatalities. And I do agree that the horn whistle can be very annoying, but there's a public safety issue in this, and I do agree, and I'm grateful that staff has addressed the concern of Mr. McDonald, and it will be coming forward. I just wanted to share that with my committee members. Thank you. If no other comments, I want to thank the staff for the presentation and the committee members. And I hope that everybody stays safe and uses common sense so that we're all here around for another day, see what the good fortune for the city of Oxnard will be. With that, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff.
Sure.